could imagine American history as being a slow leaching out of what was left of the inheritance of Catholic Europe. We're a Protestant country in a way that no other country in the world is, because we don't really have a Catholic past. What we do have, California, New Mexico, Louisiana, we do have areas that had been Catholic and were conquered. But in terms of the mainstream and so forth, we don't. We are the product of the Reformation in a way that no other country on earth is. And that, it's been in some ways a great strength. You know, the enormous economic power that our country had until very recently, and may again, you never know, was powered very much by what's called the Puritan work ethic. And that's something that's really important to understand. All of us, as Americans, have not just the cognitive of creed, but we also have sort of a ghostly Calvinist hiding in the back of our heads. And the Puritan work ethic is a good example of this. Back when our dear friends, the Pilgrims and Puritans, came to New England, they believed in radical predestination. That is to say that you are either going to heaven or hell. God's already decided. There's nothing you can do to change that. And you can't know if you're among the elect. But you can have a good idea. If God rewards you with material success, well, he wouldn't bless a bad person, now would he? So, demonstrating to your neighbors, and particularly yourself, that you were a good person and among the elect, through acquiring wealth, made the acquisition of wealth quasi-sacramental. And that has come on to the present. Only the religious element is completely leached out of it, and it's left as a sort of weird neurosis. How many people does one know who lose their job and completely collapse? Or even retire and completely collapse? Because their work is who they are. It's beyond that, there's nothing. Whereas you look at people from other cultures, if they're out of work, well, they probably don't like starving very much. But if they're not starving, then okay, I'll use the time to enjoy myself. And then we call them lazy and stupid. Well,
I've often noted when I travel that with Americans, one of the very first questions you'll ask someone is, "What do you do?"
Right.
But that's not what you'd be asked if you're in France or in any of. That's not how people identify who you are.
No, and well, you know, the old joke out here is, how can you tell you're at a party? How can you tell when a Southerner comes up to you? He'll ask, "Where are you from?" How can you tell when a Yankee comes up to you? He'll ask, "What do you do?" How can you tell if it's a Southern Californian? He'll ask, "What can you do for me?" And then maybe he'll ask your name, you know, at some point. But but no, it certainly is a big part of our national psyche. And also with that has come a great sense of self-worth. You know, if you say to an Englishman or an Italian or a Frenchman that something's un-English, un-Italian, un-French, they'll look at you and say, okay, it's foreign. But if you say something's un-American, oh, the implications of moral turpitude. And we don't, it's not, again, as simple as to say we think we're wonderful. We do. But we don't sit around thinking consciously how great we are. But you know that if something is un-American, it's bad. Downright un-American. And there are reasons for that too. And again, it comes to us in the Calvinist intellectual descent. Basically, Calvinist peoples identify very radically with the children of Israel in the Old Testament. If you look at the New England Puritans, who are, in this area anyway, our progenitors, you look at the Afrikaners in South Africa, you look at the Ulster Scots in the north of Ireland, you see the same story. Radical identification with the children of Israel in the Old Testament. So, their own stories about their history run sort of like this. First, their time under Pharaoh. For the Ulster Scots, it was in the Scotland of James I. For the Afrikaners, it was under the British at the Cape. For the New Englanders, it was in England. Then comes the Exodus. For the Ulster Scots, going to Ireland. For the Afrikaners, going out to the Transvaal, the Great Trek. And for us, either or both coming across the ocean, or then the pioneer movement into the interior. Now, of course, as with the children of Israel, the Calvinists in the wilderness found Canaanites who had to be dealt with like Canaanites. And that was true in all three places as well. Again, the shining city on the hill. So think the Ulster Scots of themselves, so think the Afrikaners, so think we. The difference is that the first two still have some of the religious element left, whereas we don't. I mean, the Calvinist religious element is pretty much leached out of most of us. But these ideas are still there. Another one that comes to us from the past is that, again, because of the work ethic, if something doesn't result in profit, it's at least suspect. So we don't really like the arts that much. And when we do, we generally like them in reaction to the Puritan ideal. So in other words, as the late great H.O. Mencken put it, the typical American reaction to puritanical restraints on the arts and so forth is smutty novels. That's Mencken, not me. But the fact is that, you know, when we're not being puritanical, we're reacting to it. And this too is something you see in our history. This pendulum swinging back and forth between periods of wild license and periods of incredible restraint. Back and forth. Although it does seem to have kind of got stuck in the 60s. But even there, what we've seen since the 60s is a sort of, how do I put it, a sort of Puritanization of our depravity. It's the most amazing thing. Where back before the 60s, of course, there were things that everybody considered sinful, and society at different times worked to try to step on them. After the 60s, these things became constitutional rights. So the same puritanical impulse either went into imposing those things on the mainstream or into other areas entirely, like animal rights and anti-smoking and stuff like that. You know, in other words, because we have to feel good about ourselves, a la our Puritan progenitors, since we can't say that abortion is evil and we have to tolerate all sorts of depravity, we'll go after smoking. And we'll feel good about ourselves. We've got to be on these moral crusades. But because they can no longer be about morality, they've got to be about anything else we can make up. You know, I myself am waiting for the crusade for vegetable rights. Salad is murder.
Well, I think it's one of the remarkable, and in California, where nothing is a sin, smoking is the greatest crime of all.
Oh, you better believe it. You better believe it. And of course, as is the case, just as with prohibition, so too you've got the reaction. I mean, I myself know a couple of smokeasies, you know, illegal bars where you can drink. I used to think, you know, that I'd turned 21, but obviously I was wrong. The state corrected me. Apparently I'm still 13, but never mind. I have to admit, and doubtless some of my audience will be scandalized, but there is a wonderful feeling of excitement and liberation to be sitting in a bar with a glass in one hand and my pipe in the other. Oh, wow, this is like so illegal. Oh, my. I mean, it's great. It's like being a teenager again. As I say, I thought I was 21, but the state corrected me. But the American psyche requires that. The little Puritan neurotic in the back of the head demands it. And this is a far cry from the question of Freemasonry, but it's all piece of a piece. You see, when I tell you these things are complex, they are. They require a lot of analysis, and people don't like